All right. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you. Glad to have you all here. It's going to be a fun one today, guaranteed. I know I'm looking forward to the conversation today. Man, we already got a huge group in. I love that. We're gonna jump right in, folks. Just because 30 minutes flies by way too much, and I actually have like a couple of announcements I want to make first off. So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 34th for 34th episode of FinTech Insider, the Breakfast Show US. I've been doing this for 34 straight business days. I've run out of t-shirts. I am Sam Mall, 11FS Managing Director, North America. I'll be your host for this morning show. Do let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from our viewers. We want to know where you're based, where you're at in the world. Please share the stream, hit that like button, and subscribe to 11FS on LinkedIn so you never miss a show. Hey, I want to give everybody an update. As a quick heads up, at 11:30 a.m., so right after this, about minutes after Eastern time, two of our 11FS researchers, Kate Moody and Vanessa Lee, you might remember Vanessa from last week, they'll be leading an online event for our latest research report. The 60-minute digital talk will take you through the key insights, lessons, and takeaways from the latest research report on designing the digital services that work for U.S. SMBs. And again, Vanessa did a great job last week talking about this report. Also, three stories that I found interesting in the news between our show yesterday and today. One, TechCrunch. They got a great write-up on the story of Walmart and Jet. So Walmart says it's going to discontinue Jet, which it acquired for $3 billion in 2016. Walmart is discontinuing Jet.com, the online-only marketplace that it acquired for $3 billion. I love that. Plus a $300 million in earnouts after that time. That is a story worth reading. It'll make a great movie one day. The second story, CNBC reports Magic Johnson, the CEO of Magic Johnson Enterprises, partnered with MBE Capital Partners to offer $100 million in loans to minority-owned and women-owned companies. The funds will be distributed through the SBA's PPP program. Good on you, Magic. And the last one is from TechCrunch. Facebook and Instagram roll out shops, turning business profiles into storefronts. Users will be able to browse and buy products directly from the business and business's Facebook page or Instagram profile. So I'm going to be monitoring my wife and daughter because, oh my God, the online shopping has been horrific over the past 2 months. And it just thanks a lot, Instagram and Facebook. I appreciate that. Today we're joined by Kush, Saxena. How'd I do on that, Kush?
You did pretty good.
Yeah, I'm horrible at that. Kush is EVP, Merchants and Acceptance at Mastercard. And today's show, we're going to take a look at how Mastercard's powering contactless payments around the globe to help keep people safe and healthy. Kush, thanks for joining us. What part of New York are you in?
I'm in the Upper West Ham, and thank you for having me.
No, not a problem. And we talked about this right before we went on air, but New York is, maybe half occupied right now? What's a safe estimate, do you think?
I've heard that the Upper West, which is, over-indexes families, about a third is not in the city anymore. So for about a third of the folks in the Upper West have left. And so, half, depending on which neighborhood you think of, may not be too far off.
Man, I just can't imagine. All right, we have got we got Key West, we got Nigeria on, Norway. Good Lord. South Africa. There you go, Kush. You're the draw, man. It was going to happen. So we have a nice global audience that's joined us. So let's dive into this. Can you talk a little bit about your role at Mastercard? What is it you focus on?
Sure. I lead merchants and acceptance for us here in the US. I drive, I also drive global merchant initiatives for us. So focused on the segment as business out here in the US.
And one of the things I love about you, Kush, and your background, yes, I did watch a couple of YouTube videos and interviews with you. So, hey, we're going to go there. You've had a great build up to your role now, right? I mean, you actually started as an entrepreneur in India in the .com days, right?
I did. That's right.
And what was that product?
So it was actually a platform for local small businesses to get online, and this was back in 1996. So it was a hyper-local business focused on one city that had a plethora of small businesses. And we were helping them build online storefronts way back in 96.
So you've been involved in this space. And you've been an entrepreneur again, right? Didn't you do something around like healthcare or something like that?
I did. I had a healthcare payment startup that was focused on making consumer payments easier in healthcare, which if you're in the US, that's not an easy thing to do.
All right. So you already just nailed two things that became and are becoming a big space. So when you're ready to do your next startup, please let me know so I can invest the right way.
Hopefully, I'll be successful enough to retire on it.
It's well, I mean, you've kind of been able to see around the corner, right? I mean, it's amazing to see these trends. So now at Mastercard, I'll tell you one of the hottest topics coming out, and as a result of COVID and what we're seeing is all around contactless. I mean, it's just pretty much on everybody's lips right now. So can you give us a little bit of background on the Mastercard contactless user study that you just released?
Sure. So look, we've believed, I believe personally that the card is one of the best user experience products in any industry that has ever come out. If you just think about what it enables for you, right?
Yeah.
You go from here to any other country, you don't know a merchant, you use the card, you buy a product, you take it back home. The amount of trust and complexity that the card abstracts is a pretty big deal. And contactless for us for a long time now has been sort of the next big feature on what is already a phenomenal product. And so we've been at the contactless journey for a while. And, sort of the primary value prop around contactless has always been convenience and safety and security. And if you think about the crisis we are in today, that's just taken on a completely new meaning. Both convenience and safety and security have taken on a completely new meaning.
Amen.
And have become elevated concerns for consumers all over the world. And so we started getting feelers and sort of early indicators from the market that there was strong cash aversion, there was strong paper aversion, and there was strong contactless preference. And so we thought, we should go launch a formal study on this, get some real data on what consumers and merchants are feeling. We thought it'd be very useful for our stakeholders, very useful for consumers. And that was, that's kind of why we did the study.
And I'm curious on the contactless adoption and what you're seeing as a result of the survey. Was this a national survey that you did in the U.S.?
No, it was a global survey. It was a
global
survey.
Okay.
It was a global survey, but it had a big U.S. focus to it.
Yeah, because the U.S. I mean, you are well aware of this, right? Throughout your career, you've worked all over the globe. The adoption of technology when it comes to financial services in the U.S. always seems to be somewhat lagging in certain areas. Contactless being one of them. I think that's a fair statement to make. And the user adoption kind of varies. Like you're in New York, right? So you look at mass transit and use cases there. There's so many when it comes to this and the convenience factor of it. I can remember a couple years ago flying through Dallas, Fort Worth, and seeing the contactless terminal there with just dust sitting on it. And I remember asking them. I said, "Has anyone ever used that?" And the answer was no. I would think I'm going to see a flip of that, or we're seeing a flip of that right now. I mean, how much adoption are you actually seeing?
We are seeing. Look, so I think a couple of comments, right? So first. While I agree, US has lagged in some areas of new technology adoption around payments and financial services, I think it's for good reason. And that's because US is one of the most mature markets.
True.
With a really high installed base. Consumers and merchants and the entire ecosystem are sort of trained and tooled to operate in a certain way. And, ripping out old technology and putting in new technology has to be done with care and thoughtfulness. And that's why we as Mastercard have sort of been at that journey, like I said, for a while. Even leading into the crisis, though, the US was very well prepared for contactless to take off. On the acceptance side, we've seen a lot of adoption with the merchant community. Transit, we've seen a bunch of transit use cases take off. The New York MTA was a very successful launch for us. And so those have all been drivers of adoption, even before the COVID crisis. In the COVID crisis, adoption has gone through the roof, right? So our study was, our study value looked at 17,000 people in 19 countries. Like I said, there was a big US component to it. 79%, nearly 8 out of 10 people are telling us that they've used contactless or are using it in some shape or form. It's grown 3x. It's grown about thrice the rate of non-contactless payment methods in the last 2 months between February and March in the US. It's grown 2x the rate of non-contactless payment methods in other markets. We've seen in the first quarter 40% growth in contactless payments. So I think, I hate to say it, but there was, this truly is a tipping point. It's a tectonic moment in my mind for a large-scale behavior shift towards what we believe is a much, much better payment method that drives safety and security and convenience for consumers. And it's really shown a lot of uptake in the last couple of months.
Yeah, I think I think that's a phrase we overuse generally in our industry, right? The tipping point. But I think, but in this case, I 100% agree with you. I think, and there's so many more. That's actually one of the questions I'll come back to you on. Coming out of the past 2-3 months that we've seen. When you did the study, is there anything that surprised you in the findings? Anything that was slightly unexpected?
What I thought was interesting, I wouldn't say anything surprised me particularly, but what I thought was interesting was I would have anticipated a sort of generational difference in preference towards contactless, mostly because it's always been about safety and security, and folks that are older or have conditions or so on and so forth would have been the ones that I would have said would have jumped in with with both their hands and feet towards contactless. And what we found was that actually this thing is truly, the interest here is truly cross-generational. 63% of what we call Gen Z consumers told us that they would advantage a merchant that had contactless. That's a huge statement if you think about an up-and-coming young population. And so I think the fact that this was truly cross-generational and very uniform in its homogeneous and its sort of interest and intent from a consumer standpoint is what I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, it's I think that's a proof point that I find more and more interesting. Probably because I'm going to be 54 this year, right? So I'm the guy who's
you don't look at Sam.
Yeah, I feel it. But you know what I mean, though. It's kind of 40, right? You have those you have those marks, man. You hit 50, and suddenly you're like, oh, I wonder what retirement's going to be like. But I've used myself as an example constantly, right? I play Call of Duty like crazy. I'm on Battlefield. I'm on my Xbox way too damn much. Thank you, COVID, for that. And I'm actually on with friends of mine who are my age and playing, right? I mean, that the concept of not adopting technology for a specific age group, I think is something that we're seeing that kind of get tossed to the side, right?
Personally, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. A good question. We got a couple good questions come in. What are one of the main drivers for 3x growth? Is that being driven from issuing or acquiring stream? Thank you, Mohammed, for that question.
It's really being driven by consumer. So I think
best answer, right? By the way,
and look, I think the issuing versus the acquiring, or the issuing or the acquiring question is a common one that shows up in our industry a lot. But we launched the study with a focus on consumer, and the truth is consumers are voting with, like I said, with both their hands and feet, saying, look, this is how we want to pay. So I think it's being driven by really the consumer. I think the merchant side, like I said, we've done a lot of work with the merchant side and the acquiring side for the last many years to get the acceptance ecosystem ready for contactless. I know issuers are really using this as an opportunity to double down on issuing. So I do think it's being driven by the consumer, and the entire ecosystem is coming together to support that.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting at 11FS, we've got kind of we're only 4 years old, but we've always had a great relationship with Mastercard. So we know the team really well. A good friend of mine I used to work with, Liam Spence in New York, is a great friend. So we have sat in your offices many a time. I think the word is riffing, just talking about what place in payments. And I've always enjoyed how aligned we are in views. One of them, and this is a great question from Sidrahar, when we talk about contactless and the move to that, this is an incredible thing. It's really good, especially when you're talking about a pandemic and this concept of adjusting user behavior. his question is, where does this leave does this leave them further behind? That's something that always comes up. And I will say, just as a shout out, what Mastercard has done globally, specifically around the underbanked and unbanked, the different programs you've had in place have been outstanding. I mean, I think you guys are at the forefront of that.
Yeah, I think you actually just almost sort of frame the response I was going to get, Sam, which is I think how you drive inclusion on the consumer front and get more unbanked and underbanked under the formal fold of the financial economy is a different issue than what the next best or the current best way of making payments happen is, which is, contactless is what we're talking about today. And look, we've been, you referenced it, we've been very focused on inclusion. This was something that Ajay sort of really came to Mastercard with and has framed a terrific agenda around. We declared very early on under Ajay's leadership that we wanted to get 500 million new consumers under the economic fold. We very recently announced that we wanted to raise that and double that. So our new goal is a billion new consumers. And I think the more we do that, the more they get access to payment methods that are safe and secure in all senses of the word, right? It's not just acceptance or contactless acceptance. It's truly getting access to the trust that's inbuilt sort of into the financial fabric of the ecosystem. And so I think the more we do there, the more that happens. And I do believe that crises like these are very well tailored to accelerating. Right. So if you think about the stimulus that just went out, the more electronic payment methods are referenced or used, the more folks that are under sort of formally included, they're actually the ones who need the stimulus the most. And it's very evident that the ones that are not part of the formal financial economy will not get access to that. And so I think crises like these create sort of the perfect moments for acceleration of inclusion, right? So my outlook on this is, look, we've done a lot on inclusion. We want to challenge ourselves. We've raised the bar for our own selves on that dimension. And I do think the crisis is an opportunity to make that happen even more.
And I'm glad you talked a little bit about the leadership at Mastercard. I think one of the things that I've been highly encouraged by coming out of, I'd say all of 2020, is the leadership at certain organizations and why it is so important to have a great leadership team, from the top down. I mean, you look at what Mastercard has done, you look at what like Microsoft, the resurgence of Microsoft and what they've been able to do. Leadership matters. I'm just going to leave it there and move on.
I agree. Couldn't agree more.
It really does. A couple more great questions. Hey, Corey. Corey's a good friend down in Louisiana with Origins Bank. Will the increased consumer preference for contactless payments push merchants to move adoption up on a priority? Right. Good question, Corey.
100%. Look, like I said, I lead merchants and acceptance. I've had merchants come to me and say, what can we do to drive contactless, contactless, and I would even say broadly touchless consumer journeys, right? So even beyond just plain acceptance. And like I said, our survey shows 45% of US consumers are saying, hey guys, we have a preference for a merchant that lets us transact on a contactless basis. 63% of Gen Zers are saying have a preference for a merchant that lets us transact with a contactless payment method. So I think merchants are seeing that.
Yeah.
And, where this might have been in the past, hey, why do I need to spend the money, or my tech integration is going to take time? I do think this is a moment where merchants are going to lean in, and it's very evident in some of the conversations I'm having. And I think the smart merchants are actually thinking much more broadly beyond just acceptance. I think they're thinking of their end-to-end consumer journeys as they sort of navigate this.
Yeah. Great question by Adu. Cards or smartphones or both? Interesting to know what the breakdown between card and smartphone usage is in terms of the surge in contactless payment adoption. Cards, smartphones, or smartwatches? Let me throw that one in too, because I love watching people in line try to pay.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if we actually got specific data on that mix.
Yeah.
And look, this was a global study, so I think what we saw was a lot of diversity. depending on the
Yeah, that makes
extent of issuance and the presence of sort of different payment methods, right? And so
Yeah.
I think in some markets where issuance has been rich, cards have done very well. In other markets where consumers have sort of smartphone preference and smartphone behavioral dynamics already pre-established, folks have used smartphones. And my outlook on that is that at some level it doesn't matter, because we've done a lot of work on getting standards deployed across the ecosystem independent of payment method, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you think about things like tokenization and MDES, a lot of smartphone payments on contactless leverage those technologies, and with those come the features around safety and security and convenience, and sort of the ecosystem standards that we think drive the right kind of behavior and the right kind of consumer value propositions, independent of payment methods. So yeah, I think there's a mix out there on the specific question that was asked, but I do feel like I do feel like a lot of the work to make those ubiquitous and almost not matter, has been work that we've done over the last many years.
You touched on a very tough topic, and that's standardization. Especially, at Mastercard, you guys, this really is global, right? So the leadership and the impacts you can make are truly global, and coming up with standards that work that way, that go across devices, go across interaction ways that work for both the consumers and the merchants. That's a massive ball of wax, dude. That's congratulations, you still have your hair. I'll say that.
I was going to say, it's been, look, I mean, I have my hair, but it's been our life's work for 50 years, right? We, our job, like, I think half our job is building the technology that makes us work. Half our job is driving the right mechanisms to drive standards in the ecosystem, because, like I said, the card works because it abstracts so much complexity across so many players, and impossible to do that without standards.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've been talking about the plastic for, God, it feels like 20 years now, and when it's going to go away, right? And when will the phone or when will the device take over? And it's still really a mix, right? I think that's a fair thing to say.
Yeah, it's definitely a mix. And look, I'll tell you, when I joined Mastercard, I was new to the industry. This was my first payments gig. I'd done some lending before, and I asked the question myself, and I've stopped asking the question because it really boils down to consumer preference, and consumers have a wide variety of choices. Like, I prefer my card. If my card, if I've got a high quality, contactless card, and that works everywhere I want to go, I don't have to care about power or battery life or whatever. That's my personal preference. Somebody else might have another preference. And so I do think we'll say a wide and rich variety of modalities by which consumers will want to pay, or depending on where commerce is happening, consumers will pay. And like I said, I think and I think the ecosystem's job is to drive the standards across all of those that make it easy to drive safe, secure, smart payments.
So a couple people have asked about the study. We just put a link out to it. Good job, team. Mastercard for already pushing that link out for those that want to read it. I'm going to be selfish, and I'm going to throw the last question in, if that's all right. So we're going to run out of time. I've asked this from a couple of folks. You've already talked about contactless and the adoption uses that we're seeing as a result of the past few months. But personally, and this doesn't have to be in payments, this can be kind of go across the spectrum. When you look at what life has been like, especially you're in New York, right? You're in the epicenter for the U.S. when it comes to this. What do you think are to be the one or two things that are significant tipping points or changes? You and I were talking right before we came on about the restaurant space, right? Which I find fascinating. I mean, what do you think? What's one or two that you think is really going to see significant change?
Look, I think, and this is, I'll sort of share my personal view on this, but I don't think that personal view is too disconnected from how consumers are generally thinking, and what I'm hearing from, my merchant friends, right?
Yeah.
I think this has been a massive shock to natural trust that consumers and people, humans, assume exists when they leave their homes, right? Whether it's to go shop, whether it's to hang out with their friends, whether it's to take a walk in the park. I think at some level, there was a trust into all of those interactions and experiences that I think has been questioned by this crisis. And I think as we all look to venture out again, subliminally, I think all of us are going to be feeling some concern, some nervousness around that lack of trust. And so I think the more providers of experiences, providers of commerce, the more we can bake in trust in the way we enable those journeys, I think the more we'll make consumers feel comfortable and come back to sort of normal life. Now, that takes very different shapes and forms depending on which experience you're talking about, right? So I live across Riverside Park. There are signs all over saying wear your mask. And nowadays, there are cops that are actually handing out masks. That's the public government doing what they can to make me feel a certain degree of trust, right?
Yeah.
I think contactless at merchants or end-to-end contactless journeys at merchants is a sign of trust. We've gotten emails from some airlines that are saying, look, we'll not fill middle seats, and we'll keep one seat distance, and we'll hand out gloves and masks at the entryway. That's another form of trust. So I think the most important thing here is going to be how we drive indicators of trust in the minds of people if we want them to come out again, because I think that's what's gotten shook during this crisis.
Man, that was a good answer. That was a really good answer. I'm going to go back and capture that phrase you just said, those indicators of trust. I would say if there's two words personally for me that just keep getting hammered home day after day as we go through this, I think trust is definitely a massive one, right? I mean, it just is the concept of trust and what it means, right? What does that mean in this age that we're living through? And blending that with empathy. I said that over and over and over again. There's probably a good third where I can do a Venn diagram. I'll think of it later.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll get there. But folks, we ran out of time. Yeah, we ran out of time, folks. I'm sorry. This flies by. Kush, thanks for joining us. Where's the best place people to find more about you and what you're doing at Mastercard?
My LinkedIn profile, our bio page on the Mastercard website, or just reach out to me, Kush.Saxena@Mastercard.
There you go, folks. All right, that's it for today. Tomorrow I'll be joined by Amanda Orson at Curve. Again, if you know someone who'd be perfect to come on the show, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Sam Mall on Twitter is a great place to reach out to me, or at podcast@11fs.com. Everybody have a great day. Thanks for joining.
Perfect. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.